Welcome to the League of Women Voters Tacoma-Pierce County Primary Election Candidate Forum for Washington State Congressional District 10. I'm Lydia Zepeda, the moderator, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Tacoma-Pierce County and the League of Women Voters of Thurston County and our community sponsors, I welcome the candidates and the audience to this Community Candidate Forum. The League of Women Voters Tacoma-Pierce County acknowledges that we gather on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples, surrounded by the traditional waters and in the shadow of the magnificent Mount Tahoma. We actively seek inclusive and respectful partnerships that honor Indigenous cultures, histories, identities, and current realities. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization whose mission for the past 100 years has been to empower informed and active participation of citizens in government. Candidate forums are one of the many ways that we do this. Anyone 16 years of age or older can be a member of the League of Women Voters. For more information on membership, go to our website, lwvtpc.org. That's lwvtpc.org. The candidates for the 10th Congressional District are in ballot order: Marilyn Strickland, Richard Boyce, Keith Swank, Eric Mahaffey, and Dan Ernest Gordon. This year's primary election is August 2nd. If you have not yet registered or have moved, you may register or change your address online at votewa.gov. That's votewa.gov by July 25th. You should receive your ballot by July 18th if you are a registered voter and your address is correct. Your ballot must be postmarked or placed in a ballot drop box by 8 p.m. on August 2nd. This forum is being recorded and will be posted at the League of Women Voters Tacoma-Pierce County website, LWVTPC. That's LWVTPC. Questions have been prepared by members of the League of Women Voters of Tacoma-Pierce County and our co-sponsoring organizations. We invite live audience questions via text to 253-948-6025. That's 253-948-6025. Questions must be directed to all candidates and may be reworded or consolidated. Our timekeeper today is Shelley Knight of the League of Women Voters, Thurston County. She will be using an electric timer that turns from purple to yellow when there are 15 seconds left, and then turns to red with the word stop when the time is up. Candidates, when you see the stop card, you may finish a short sentence. Candidates, please stay on gallery view so that you can see the timer and you can see me, the moderator. A reminder, please do not talk unless it's your turn. Please mute yourself when it's not your turn to speak. The audience is on mute and cannot use the chat function. A reminder that civility is expected, that we sent you ground rules, and that we want you to each confirm on the video that you agree to the ground rules which we sent you, which among other things include addressing the issues and making no personal attacks. Each candidate, please give me a thumbs up that you agree to our ground rules. Thank you all, I really appreciate that. Each candidate has up to 2 minutes for an opening statement. After that, the order of questions will rotate and each candidate will be asked the same question. At the end, each candidate will be given a 1-minute closing statement. The order of the opening 2-minute statements is in ballot order. So we will start with Marilyn Strickland, then Richard Boyce, then Keith Swank, Eric Mahaffey, and I still don't see Dan Ernest Gordon. I believe he is a no-show. So Marilyn Strickland, please go ahead with your 2 minutes.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters of Tacoma-Pierce County and Thurston County for hosting this forum today. And thank you to my fellow candidates for putting your hat in the ring to run for Congress. My name is Marilyn Strickland, and I have the distinct honor of representing the 10th Congressional District of Washington State. This has been my freshman term, and I tell people that I can't believe that it has already been 18 months, and I can't believe it's only been 18 months. We have experienced a lot in a very short period of time. But every day when my staff goes to work in the district and when I come to DC, I'm fighting for a nation that is more safe, more just, and more secure for all people. And part of that work does include empowering voters and defending democracy. We know that there is a lot that's happening in this country, and sometimes the work that we do, the meat and potatoes of government, gets overlooked. To date, my office has recovered over $5 million for constituents in the district from government agencies. We passed a bipartisan infrastructure bill in Washington, D.C. that I was proud to be a part of, and that means expanded broadband service, cleaner water, funds for roads and bridges, mass transit, electric vehicles charging stations, and creating good jobs that pay well. As we think about what we face as a nation, it's incredibly important to make sure that we have leaders who understand what the needs are here at home. These are challenging times, and these are times for leaders who want to work together, to step up, to stay focused on what matters most to our district. It's my honor to represent you, and I look forward to the opportunity to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Boyce.
Yes, I'm Richard Boyce, and I don't know what I'm doing here. I've been here before and look forward to getting out and meeting some people. My main concern with the country today is I'm really concerned with the immigration problem on the southern border. I think it's way out of hand. We need to close off the border and we need to start deporting people soon. I'm concerned about food crises. They mentioned things about food crises, but they never flesh it out. They never give us any details. What do they mean by a food crisis, food shortage? And we all know that there's an energy crisis, and the energy crisis is probably most likely responsible for the food crisis. Energy is jobs. Energy is food. Energy is everything. Our energy industry is crippled by the ESG system that is environment, social, and governance. And the EPA and the SEC are using ESG to cripple our energy industry because oil does not meet the environmental standards, so they can't get loans to exploit the minerals in the ground. So we're going to have to tackle energy first, if not soon, and then everything else will follow. I'm concerned about 2030. You'll own nothing and be happy. I'm really concerned about the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset. I want to know more about it, and there's more knowledge of it in DC, and I want to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Keith Swank, your opening statement, please. And please mute yourself after you speak.
Good evening, and thank you for having me here today, and thank you for the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this forum. My name is Keith Swank. I'm a United States Army Airborne Infantry veteran, and I'm a 32-year veteran of the Seattle Police Department. I'm a captain there. I have been wearing a uniform my entire adult life, defending you and your communities and our communities in this country, and I would defend you in Washington, D.C. Right now, the biggest concern for people in the 10th Congressional District is crime and inflation. Crime is out of control. It's at the highest it's ever been during my 32 years as a police officer. When I came on the department in 1990, we were at the height of the crack epidemic. Crime is higher now than it was then. And the reason why crime is high as it is because of Democrat policies. That's why we are where we are right now. Inflation is at an all-time high. The federal government tells us 8.2%, but they neglect to take into consideration gasoline prices and the price of food and the price of living, which is exactly what we take into consideration here in the 10th Congressional District when we're paying our bills every month. So I was working hard to bring inflation down. Last year, over 107,000 Americans died of opioid overdoses. Much of those was fentanyl that came across our southern border in Mexico. It's fentanyl made in China, comes across our southern border and into America and kills our family, our friends, and our neighbors. That must stop. We've lost so many young people that we have decreased the life expectancy of Americans, and we need to fight against that and stand against that, and I will do that. It's our federal government's responsibility to keep Americans safe and secure, and I will be your advocate for law enforcement in Washington, D.C., and work to bring inflation down. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Eric Mahaffey, your 2-minute statement.
Thank you. My name is Eric Mahaffey. Can you hear me? Good. My name is Eric Mahaffey. I have been studying politics since my 20s. I've been paying attention to our system and some of the ways our country has been getting divided. I remember listening to radio shows and talk shows that seemed to know nothing about the systems but had great viewership. And I feel like we've been getting knocked off our proper course for many, many years. And I'm going to pay a lot of attention to trying to figure out how to get us to settle back down again, so we can have proper discourse and actually be able to talk to each other of different groups. One of my biggest concerns is the inflation issue that's going on right now. Back in 2016, I was actually studying numbers, and we had $4 trillion in the American economy. And recently, I went back and looked, and during the Trump administration, we've gone from 14 to $22 trillion. And that is usually a really good way to cause just runaway inflation. It doesn't happen when the money's being pumped into the economy. It happens afterwards. And usually the wrong party gets the credit for the supposed destruction. There are lots of tricks being used to take our business away. And when you're passing laws, you kind of have to pay attention to some of the background, the unintended consequences. Our private medical doctors, the people who own their own businesses, are starting to go away because they put together apps that the doctors all have to belong to be able to share medical information. And my understanding is there's one set fee for this. And that set fee is huge for someone who's just treating a few patients and nothing for a major hospital. It's also happening to the pharmacies. So got to pay attention to the unintended consequences and the little things that are hidden inside of bills. It's a fun, complex world, and I enjoy this kind of thinking. That's part of why I became a service electrician. Basically the same type of thought, just deals with words instead of power. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you all. Now we come to the questions. Each candidate gets up to 90 seconds to answer each question. For some questions, I will indicate you have only 60 seconds. Again, live audience questions can be texted to 253-948-6029. That's 253-948-6029. The candidate order will rotate for each question, so that for question number 1, we'll start with Richard Boyce. First question. What legislation do you propose or support to protect voting rights and or encourage voter turnout? Richard Boyce.
I think things are going pretty good the way they are in Washington state. And I don't believe the federal government should be involved in elections at all. The states have the responsibility of running elections. It's the Secretary of State. Let them do it. If there's a problem, there will be a suit and it will go through the courts, and that's how they'll manage it. There shouldn't be much time involved at all in the federal government dealing with elections. That's it for me.
Thank you. Keith Swank, what legislation do you propose or support to protect voting rights and or encourage voter turnout?
There are irregularities going on in our voting systems throughout the country, and people of both parties, Democrats and Republicans, both say that they don't have confidence in our voting and our election process. So what we need to do for that is we need to make sure that only people who are legally allowed to vote are voting, and make sure we clean up our voter rolls. Those are things that should be handled at the state level. And when we do that, it will give confidence into the voting for the people. But at the federal level, this is what I propose. I propose that the general election, every time we have it, will be a national holiday, and we have the day off so that people have the opportunity, especially when they go to polling places, to be able to spend the time necessary to get there to vote and exercise their constitutional right to vote. So when we work with our state governments to make sure that we clean up our voter rolls, make sure that the system is secure, make sure it's not hackable, make sure that we have paper ballots at the state level, and the federal government make sure that we work together with the state governments to give them the resources necessary to conduct free and fair elections And lastly, we need to audit all of our elections to make sure that we are doing a good job, and it needs to be transparent and we share it with everybody in the state and in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Mahaffey.
I believe that our election system is actually going fairly well. I do believe, however, that there are some basics that need to be put in at the federal level, and the general of how to handle it needs to be dealt with at the state level. We need to make sure that everybody has equal access to the voters booth and equal time to be able to deal with it. I'm a great believer in the mail-in voting system because it gives you a chance to sit down with your cell phone or your computer or any other way you get your information and be able to figure it out. There's a lot of states that use a down ballot to kind of hurry you up so you can pick Democrat or Republican and it just elects for you. That I don't think that's actually a very good idea. I am a great believer in the ranked voting because I believe that every last single person should have a say in the last two candidates standing. And the simplest way of doing that is to carefully explain how ranked voting works to people so it doesn't look like some weird mysterious box, but it allows everybody to pick. If there's 10 people running, it allows you to have 9 picks. Whoever gets the least amount of votes every time you add it up gets pushed out, and everybody will have a say in the last 2 people standing. And then the election only has to happen once instead of this case where it's going to be happening twice. There's a lot of very simple techniques that are very effective that I think could be applied very even-handedly in allowing everybody to have access to the ballot box. Thank you.
Thank you. Marilyn Strickland.
Thank you. I was proud to vote for both House Resolution 1, Before the People Act, and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And what those 2 pieces of legislation do, they empower voters. It made Election Day in November a national holiday. It encouraged mail-in ballots, early voting, and also worked to make sure that people had access to the ballot box. As we look at what has happened across America, during the last presidential election, although there were challenges, every single Secretary of State validated that Joe Biden did in fact win the election. The failed coup attempt of January 6th was the biggest example of an attempt to suppress the votes of millions of people. So I support House Resolution number 1, the House for the People Act, as well as the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We want to make sure that every person who's eligible to vote can vote in this country. We want to make sure we make it easier for them, not harder. Let's have early voting. Let's have mail-in ballots. Let's make sure that every person has the opportunity to exercise their constitutional right. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. We'll start with Keith Swank. If elected, will you support or sponsor legislation to ensure that American women have access to contraception and abortion? Keith Swank.
I believe that American women have access to contraception and abortion as it stands now. And so to answer this question, I would say that the Supreme Court ruling in the Dobbs case is correct, that abortion should be left to the states. Anything that's not included in the Constitution of the United States should be left up to the states. For instance, the state of Washington has nothing to worry about because they have legislation here that gives the ability for people to have abortions. So it doesn't change anything. I know that other states are going to possibly be outlawing abortion, but that's what freedom's about. You have the freedom to vote those people out if you disagree with it, or vote people in if you agree with it. And you also have the freedom to leave a state or a jurisdiction that you don't agree with it. And we can vote with our feet that way. So I would not be voting to pass any legislation at the federal government because it's not the federal government's responsibility there. It's up to the states to make those decisions and up to the people of the states, and the people can decide what needs to be done as far as abortion goes. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Mahaffey.
I believe the abortion thing is something that needs to remain. I don't like it when women get to that point where that is a decision that has to be made. But it's not something that should ever be taken away. I'm just as frustrated with the fact that proper education is being denied. I'm frustrated with the fact that birth control is being denied. I'm frustrated with the fact that a lot of things are happening that are doing this to people. But no, abortion needs to stay. I'm very frustrated that the judges that basically went in front of the people and, in my opinion, lied and deceived us telling us they weren't ever going to vote it down, Roe v. Wade down, when it came through the court system. And then as soon as they got their first chance, they did. I'm also vehemently against one group of people allowing themselves the right to decide to control another group of people in any circumstance. There are several laws out there that are being considered that basically say we can control you, but you can't control us. And that just is completely against what America should stand for and what we believe in. So no, the Roe v. Wade was a bad decision by the courts. It was 3 judges that, from my opinion, took a bribe for a full-time job they can't be fired from. And that needs to be looked at and investigated and possibly get our courts straightened up. But no, I'm for it. Thank you.
Marilyn Strickland.
Access to reproductive health care is in jeopardy in America. And any person who wants access to a safe and legal abortion should get access to it, regardless of which state they live in. The ruling by the Supreme Court was tragic, because now there are 26 states on tap to outlaw abortion. And here's what this means. We're lucky in Washington state that we have access to abortion, but people will now travel to other states to get access to safe and legal abortion. That will put a strain on our existing system. With that said, I will be happy later this week to vote again for the Women's Health Protection Act, which will codify Roe v. Wade. And I'm also going to introduce a bill that I'm sponsoring, the Ensuring Access to Abortion Act, which will basically protect women and allow them to travel from state to state if they want to get access to an abortion. Not having access to safe and legal abortion and reproductive health care disproportionately affects women of color, low-income women, and women in rural communities who don't have access to health care. This is a reproductive rights issue. It's a social justice issue. It's a women's rights issue. And it also is something that really is about controlling women. If we want this country to live up to its promise of freedom for all, women should be free to decide what to do with their bodies.
Thank you. Richard Boyce.
Yes, I believe George Stephanopoulos asked Mitt Romney on TV if he would outlaw contraception for women if he was elected. And a senatorial candidate in Colorado was accused of doing the same thing. So contraception has never been in question. Nobody's ever said that they're going to do away with contraception for people. And I think that abortion rights are right where they belong, with the states. So there's my take on abortion and birth control. Love birth control. I think everybody should have access to it. And abortions, go to your state house. That's it.
Thank you. And I just want to remind the audience that if they have questions, that they should text their questions to 253-948-6029. I noticed that people are using the raise the hand function, and that does not work. We're doing a webinar, so please text your questions to this number. Okay, next question. And we'll start with Eric Mahaffey. What legislation would you support or propose to address climate change? Eric Mahaffey.
Oh, that's a tough one. There are a lot of things that could really help climate change. We do have a lot of abilities out there to pay attention to the weather, but people get nervous when you start trying to play with that. I'd like to see a lot more electric cars come in. I'd like to see a lot more people aware of the harm they're doing, and some other simple ways of explaining it to folks. Exact legislation, haven't put a lot of thought into that. I'm sure I could come up with something after a little while, but not during this 2 minutes I have to chat. But there are machines out there being built that will help filter the air. We need to look more into those. There are ways of cleaning rivers and water and dealing with that. There are, well, I'm stumbling. There are plenty good methods to help us move in the right direction, but we've got to stop depending on fossil fuel, and we have to stop depending on a lot of the standard ways we've been destroying our own atmosphere. One of the things I like to talk to people about is the ice cores. We drill a lot of ice cores, and inside the ice cores are little trapped bubbles of air, and we can actually go back through quite a few thousand of years of history in our ice and be able to pull it up and be able to see the changes that have happened in the air over time. So it's very easy to document it. It's very easy to prove it's happening. And this ball of stuff is just a science experiment, and it's going to do whatever we tell it to do chemically. So we need to be careful, and climate change is a big deal. Thank you.
Thank you. Marilyn Strickland.
Great, thank you for this question. So when we look at climate change, we need to take a holistic approach to it. And I often say that people don't need a lecture, we need options. So as we look at everything that causes climate change, everything from transportation, how we use energy, I think there are a few things we could do. The bipartisan infrastructure bill that we passed did a big thing to address climate change. It's investing heavily in mass transit. It's investing in electric vehicle charging stations and giving people choices. At the local level, there's some things that our employer community can do. They can think about geographic equity of where they locate jobs so people don't have to drive or use transportation for a long distance to get there. Land use that allows dense housing to be built next to transit stations. And then finally, just being open to what is possible when it comes to science and technology. When we talk about climate change too, we need to think about resilience. We know that summer is often fire season in the Pacific Northwest. So are we amply funding the departments that actually have to deal with fire prevention and also having to deal with forest fires? And then finally, really as far as how we look at ourselves as consumers, what are we consuming? Where is it coming from? Are we buying our food locally so that we're not having to create a bigger climate footprint with how we get food? So it's a very holistic approach. The infrastructure plan addressed some of that, and there are other things that we can do, again, to give people more choices to reduce our carbon footprint. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Boyce.
Yes, I might need some help on this one because I don't mind solar, don't mind wind, but I think before we eliminate the fossil fuel, we need to have the wind and solar infrastructure in first. Where you want to go, you're just knocking down dams that provide up to 10% of our electricity on the Snake River and nothing in place to replace it. We're just going to have brownouts, blackouts, and chaos. And I think that might be really the intent, is the chaos. So yeah, I don't mind any kind of energy, and the safer the better, but the replacement needs to be in place first before you eliminate what we're using right now. That's me.
Thank you. Keith Swank.
Sorry about that. My computer didn't unmute. I don't think the government should be picking winners and losers. I want to talk about electric vehicles for a little bit here because I want to tell you about the real science about it that isn't being shared with people. For every car battery for a Tesla, it takes 500,000 pounds of soil to be removed from the earth in a third world country with child slave labor to get the rare mineral elements needed to produce the battery. I'm a conservative. That's not how you conserve the earth. And then after these batteries are made, then we bring them in these vehicles. And then when they're no longer any good, they sit in the field and they leach into our ground and they destroy the earth even more. So let's talk about the real science here. This green science is not green, and we will find out later on that we are really harming the earth with what we're doing here. And so right now, fossil fuels are the way for us to keep our energy going, and they're going to find out later on that they actually are cleaner. Electric vehicles are heavy, they burn off tires at a higher rate, and that produces fossil fuels being put into the atmosphere at a higher rate than comes out of the tailpipe of combustible engine cars. So we need to study the real science about this. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is 60 seconds, and we will start with Marilyn Strickland. What does equity and inclusion mean to you? Marilyn Strickland.
Thank you. So when we talk about equity inclusion, there's a part of it also called diversity. So it's DEI parlance. And what equity inclusion really does is this. It reminds us that when we look at everything from housing to jobs to education, that the system that we have right now isn't always equitable. And inclusion is recognizing how we bring underserved and underrepresented communities into the fold so that we are bridging the gaps. When people talk about DEI, some folks believe that this is a zero-sum game, that we are helping one group at the expense of another. That is simply not true. When we lift up underserved and marginalized communities, that benefits all of us. So when we look at the household wealth gap, when we look at the gap in education performance, when we look at gaps when it comes to employment, there's a way to make investments to help people to recognize that we do have gaps still, but really looking at DEI as a way to really foster what we call opportunity for all people so that all people can thrive and succeed.
Thank you. Richard Boyce.
Equity is the new socialism. They couldn't get by with equality, so they use equity. That's where you take something from everyone and give it to people who don't have it, and just making people who work for it angry. And inclusion is already available to us. Nobody's excluded. All you have to do is be qualified, join in, and that's inclusion. They had to eliminate equality because they found that of the first 28 astronauts we had, 24 of them were only child or firstborn. If you can't have equality in a family, you can't have it in general population. So I guess I'm running out of time. I'd like to spend some time on it.
Thank you. Keith Swank.
Equity, inclusion, diversity are all terms that are used to divide us from each other. We use equity instead of equality. We talked about equality, now equity is the term that we use, and the left forces that upon us and tells us that equity is what's correct. No, equality is what's correct. Inclusion, people are included, but this means the left's part about this is they want to have diversity of people, but not diversity of thought. So I stand for diversity of thought, diversity of reasons, diversity of thinking and discussing things. And we are being held back from being able to do that because the left controls our media and our social media and all of that. So all this is doing is pitting people against each other, and it needs to stop so that we can save America from internal conflict. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Mahaffey.
The equity and inclusion. My last two jobs, I've worked around amazingly diverse groups of people. I've worked for 4 years on a fishing boat with 150 people from all around the world. And right now I'm working in a hospital, which has a lot of people from a lot of different countries helping in there. So I've had a chance to talk directly to people that are being excluded because a lot of the garbage that's happening in our system. There is, when I discovered that people who live in low taxation areas where you have low property values, their schools are usually heavily underfunded. And those people start out with a very low education and end up going very much in the wrong direction. Usually I can speak about this stuff a little clearer. I don't know why you guys are making me a smidge nervous. It needs to be dealt with. It needs to be addressed. It is a problem. I don't care how much people try to say it isn't. Many years ago, I used to think bad things happen to good people all the time. I've learned that's not true. There's a bunch of trash going on out there and it needs to be stopped.
Thank you very much. The next question, the following questions will be 90 seconds. We'll start with Richard Boyce. Currently, access to healthcare depends on your age, your income, employment status, and it can be disrupted by a change of jobs, a move, where you go to college, your marital status, or just traveling out of your service area. What legislation would you support or propose to ensure that all Americans have access to healthcare? Richard Boyce. You're on mute.
Okay, none at the federal level, and it's nothing to do with the federal government. I have had 6 or 8 emails asking that question of me. What about universal health care? What about health care for everyone? I suggest all those people get together and meet in Olympia and go see Jay Inslee and say, yo, Jay, why don't you hook us up with this universal health care thing? And if he can't do it, nobody can. So yeah, I think that the federal government needs to stay out of state health care. And that's about it.
Keith Swank, what legislation would you support or propose to ensure all Americans have access to health care?
I believe that the federal government has no role in healthcare either. I didn't see it anywhere in the Constitution. I looked it over again last night, didn't see it any place in there. So it's not a position for the federal government. It should be handled at the state level, as Richard just said. But here's some things I think we should do with healthcare. We should be able to buy healthcare across state lines like we do auto insurance. People should be able to tailor their healthcare for the needs of their families and for themselves. Americans and people in the 10th Congressional District know what's best for their families, and I want to empower them to make those decisions so they can do that. Whenever we have a government run anything at all, there's a lot of waste there. You can just take a look at what's happening with the VA and the Medicare and things like that that's going on there, and you read stories about people dying all the time for not getting treatment. So that's not helping people out. We need to give them the opportunity to pick the medical care that they want to have, the health care that they want, and be able to buy it across state lines. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Mahaffey.
Yeah, I actually have a slightly radical idea on this. I'd like to spend a lot more time than a minute and a half on this. One of the ideas I've thought of for quite a while is that we are paying our medical system when we have what we don't want. We actually pay them when we're sick. So they are encouraged to keep us sick. All the people who supply everything want us to be sick. I honestly think that we should only be paying our insurance when we're well. If we only pay it when we're healthy and we have what we want, and we're getting our needs met and we're being kept healthy, then and not pay it when we're off time, because when you're sick, you're not at work. When you're not at work, you're not making money. When you're not making money, you can't afford to pay for your health care. So why are we're being put in a position where we have to kind of drop our health care because we don't have the money and we want to feed ourselves? The system is badly broken. And in my opinion, there's too many business people in government right now that are helping business become more and more profitable, where government is supposed to be used to help the people survive better. We're supposed to be Americans. Help your neighbor, take care of each other, look out for each other, watch out for when the system is being abused by people to line their own pockets. I do have some basic ideas, but like I said, I can't cover them in a minute and a half. I've set up a website. Go spend some time looking around there and learn who I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Marilyn Strickland.
Medicare is federally run healthcare. And if someone can travel across state lines to buy insurance, they should be able to travel across state lines to get a safe and legal abortion if it becomes outlawed in multiple states. The thing that I would do is I would expand the Affordable Care Act and add the public option back into it, which was the original intent when Barack Obama first introduced it, but he had to take it out to get it through Congress. The ACA covers 35 million people now. We can expand it by adding a public option, because a public option will actually add competition to the market. Most people rely on their employer right now to get health care, or they qualify for Medicare or Medicaid. We need to give people more options, more opportunity, drive down costs, and allow Medicare to negotiate pharmaceutical prices. In addition to that, vision care, dental care, and hearing care should be part of basic health care. They should not be a la carte items that you'd have to pay extra for. So that's what I would do as far as a policy decision, to make sure that every person in America has access to good health care.
Thank you. Next question. We'll start with Keith Swank. Children can't vote, but you're running to represent them and their interests. What legislation do you support or propose to promote the safety, education, and well-being of children? Keith Swank.
Well, we're talking about the federal government here, and our position of the federal government, the topics you talk about, safety and education for children, should be met at the local level. So I encourage our state legislators to pass and talk about the legislation that's necessary for education here at the state. The federal government should not be involved in education at all. Bureaucrats in Washington, D.C., 3,000 miles away, do not know what's best for children. Parents know what's best for the children here in the 10th Congressional District, and I know that they can pick what's the right thing for their children. As far as safety goes, we need to make sure that our schools are safe and secure, but that happens right here at the local level because, again, the local people know what's best to keep their schools safe and keep their children safe. And so at the federal government, as a police officer, I would be an advocate for and an expert in what we need to do to secure our cities and our communities and our schools to make them safer for everybody, including our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Eric Mahaffey.
Yeah, right now I'm watching our people thinking about trying to lock down our schools to make our kids safer. And I went to a school that felt a little bit more like a jail. I hate to imagine what it felt like if it had a fence around it. The biggest thing you can do for kids to help take care of them is the school lunch program. I was a child who didn't always get my lunch or get my breakfast when I was going to school, and I depended a bit on that system. That by itself gives kids a stronger brain, a stronger ability to think. We need to also start evening out a lot of the way our taxes are distributed, both in the state and federal level, to the schools, so that the schools that have the lower tax houses don't end up with rotten schools. A good, solid beginning education is vitally important, but so is decent daycare and being able to get some good people to look after our kids. There are a lot of things that can be done, and the younger you can start them, the healthier of an adult you're going to create. Where if you take away a lot of a child's benefits, take away a lot of the lunches, or take away a lot of that stuff that you really depend on getting your body to grow and your mind to mature early in life, it doesn't come back. They did a study on a bunch of orphan children who weren't being held by parents as they were growing up, and I forget what country it was, but most of these kids lost a lot of their ability to think because they just weren't held and coddled at a young age. It starts young, and the younger we can get it started and the more we can take care of kids, the better this nation will be.
Thank you. Marilyn Strickland.
So Frederick Douglass has a quote that says, "It's easier to raise strong children than it is to fix broken men." And what that quote means to me is that making the investment in children and young people is going to actually be more cost effective in the long run and create a healthier society. There are some specific policies we can engage in at the federal level. The child income tax credit kept many families out of poverty during the pandemic. We should extend it and make it permanent. Eric talked about nutrition and lunches. We should have free meals in school for every child, regardless of their income level, and make that food nutritious and delicious so that kids aren't being discriminated against or feeling shamed if they have to have free or reduced lunch. We have to make sure that the basic needs of families are being met. That's affordable housing, that's good jobs for their parents, and all the things that happen outside of a classroom before a child shows up in the classroom. Access to healthcare, making sure that their mental health needs are met, and also just helping young people understand that even if you don't go to the university, going to a trade, going into the military, going to tech school is as honorable as going to the university. We have to start marginalizing young people and making them feel like alternate paths are some consolation prize. There are a lot of ways to be successful, and we can lift up our children from the time they are born to the time they graduate from high school.
Thank you. Richard Boyce.
Yes, I too think that the federal government should have nothing to do with education in the states, but I would also like to add that I think the sexualization of our children in schools today is appalling. I think it's aberrant to have drag time story hour in schools, and we have teachers discussing their sex lives, sexual preferences, and what they think that the children should be doing. It's disgusting. And a lot of that is supported by our Department of Education. After all, they're the people who gave us Common Core, and that's where all this came from. It was all Common Core is the root of all that's going on in our schools right now. So there you go. Take it to the states and clean it up.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Eric Mahaffey. Since transportation is the biggest single generator of greenhouse gas emissions. What legislation do you propose or support to reduce these emissions? Eric Mahaffey.
Transportation. Once again, electric vehicles, electric grid, finding a way to get away from fossil fuels, trying to find ways to cool the planet off. The transportation industry, more buses. Trains are actually pretty fuel efficient. Got a lot of the hybrid buses that are coming out. They have the electric generators on them. So there's a lot of things that can be done. I think I would start trying to get us away from the fossil fuels. And I understand that we can't just turn off fossil fuels and leave everybody with dry tanks. We've got to find a way to make these vehicles more accessible, find a way to deal with the pollution issues that may be caused by creating them, if there really are any, trying to figure out what it takes to stop using fossil fuels. That's all my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Marilyn Strickland.
So what we have to do is find ways to reduce our carbon footprint. And for many of us, transportation is a big part of our day. As I mentioned earlier, we did pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which addressed some of those things, but also looking at things from shipping to biofuels for aviation, and also the Build More Transit Near Housing Act that I was proud to co-sponsor. Again, people need choices and they need options. So if we can give people choices in their lifestyle and the daily life to make different decisions about how they use transportation, that is a good way to think about how we can reduce our carbon footprint. And again, this includes everything from how we move goods to and from ports. What kind of vehicles are we using in shipping? What kind of vehicles are we using when it comes to how we move people? We're talking about building high-speed rail that goes from Vancouver, BC to Portland, Oregon. That thing could be electrified. So I think that we have to be very creative and innovative and open-minded, but also reminding us again, we don't want to give people a lecture. We want to give them options.
Thank you. Richard Boyce.
Yes, they're spending a lot of money to build apartments or pods in specific locations where they can try to channel people onto these mass transit things we have going right now. But you can sit by the tracks in Tacoma and Lakewood and see empty trains going by all day long. I mean, there's days when nobody rides them. And what are you going to do about that? If one person relies on it, you have to keep it going. And it costs more than giving the person a job, giving an income and letting them stay home. So yeah, it should all take care of itself. If you can afford a car and afford the gas, drive. And I don't think there's too much carbon. And I'm not sold on global warming. That's it.
Thank you. Keith Swank.
It's interesting how we sit here and talk all the time about how the science is settled. And I'm telling you that the science is not settled. There are scientists out there that don't agree with the what's being said by the media and by the left. So with that being said, I'm going to go back to electric cars and talk about how they pollute the earth more than combustible engine cars. As we talked about before, it destroys the earth by removing all the soil to get these precious rare metals that are heavy and are poisonous to people, and it kills people there. And then we talk about we're going to convert people to electric cars. A Tesla costs $60,000 starting out. Regular people working can't buy a $60,000 car. Electric cars are for rich people, and poor people need to have combustible engine cars, and they need to have gasoline that's affordable. And in 2023, the Democrats of the state are going to add another 50 cents to the gallon of gas. And this is unaffordable for people here. It's hurting everybody here in this area, and inflation hasn't even begun to hit yet. And lastly, using biofuels is taking food out of the supply chain for American citizens to eat. We're talking about we're going to have food shortages, and the left wants to talk about using our food to make biofuels that doesn't make any sense at all. And people's lives are hanging in the balance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. We'll start with Marilyn Strickland. Given the high cost of housing in the Congressional District 10, what legislation would you propose or support to ensure that housing is affordable for everyone in your district?
Right, thank you for that question. Even during my time as mayor and my time at the Seattle Metro Chamber of Commerce was part of a group called Up for Growth. And this is really addressing the housing shortage up and down the entire I-5 corridor. People are moving south into the 10th Congressional District, not just because there's more housing or it's more affordable, because it's a great place to live. With that said, we have a supply problem. We need to build more housing for people at every stage and every age of their lives. Housing is primarily a local issue, and local land use often is the biggest barrier to building more housing. But we also need to look at barriers that exist for the development community and builders to build more housing. The federal government does have a role to play in this. The Housing and Urban Development Department can provide incentives for people to build more affordable housing. We can also make sure that doing what we can to get the Build Back Better plan passed, which, by the way, had $160 billion to invest in affordable housing. If you think about what that money could do to address some of the homelessness challenges and addressing people on the lower end of the income scale, it's a way to add more supply. It's a way to work with the private sector and do what we can to dramatically increase the supply of housing so it's more affordable for more people.
Thank you. Richard Boyce.
Yes, I understand we're like 2.5 to 3 million housing units short, and we have a jailbreak on the southern border. And all the illegal aliens coming in need a place to stay. That's why housing is going some places from $700 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment to $1,600, $2,500 a month. And that's because of the pressure by refugees and illegal immigrants. We need to catch up on building housing before we start bringing in more people. And the federal government has nothing to do with it. I just saw on the internet today, USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, has a mortgage program you can apply for. For what? And I remember a project called FHA 235, where you could spend $235 and move into a brand new home. And 2 years after that program was in effect, people were walking away from those houses by the thousands. The federal government needs to stay out of the housing business and leave it up to the locals, not BlackRock. I'm done.
Thank you. Keith Swank.
Inflation is causing housing to be out of price for most people. It's going to continue to skyrocket. So the thing the federal government can do is get its spending under control and start producing fossil fuel, oil and gasoline here in America to reduce the prices of our fuel that is killing people here in the 10th Congressional District. They have to pay $5 to $6 a gallon for gas. And then you go into the grocery store, the cost of food is increasing 25, 30%. It is very detrimental here. In Washington state, before you even take your first shovelful of dirt to build a house, the fees, impact fees, are $35,000 to $50,000. That is unacceptable, and that's government overreach. So we need to make sure that we work on stuff here at home. The federal government shouldn't be involved in it, but here in this Washington state, Olympia is charging people a lot of money to build homes, and it is very unsustainable, and people cannot afford homes. So we need to lower our inflation, and we need to start making sure that we're energy independent and people will be able to afford homes. The way it is right now, a sheet of ply would cost $40 or $50. If you build a house, it's going to be so unaffordable for people that they won't be able to even buy one. Thank you.
Me? My turn?
Yes, sorry, Eric Mahaffey.
Right now, we are having some serious inflation problems. Inflation is usually caused when someone pumps a lot of money into our economy. Trump gave a lot of rich people a huge tax cut, and these people who understand how to use money as a tool are now just buying houses up for cash, forcing people who want to try to buy houses to actually pay more and more and more for them. So huge tax cuts backfired in that regards and giving us huge inflation. Also, the biggest expense on purchasing a house for an average person like myself is the paying of interest. And I have a radical idea of how the government can actually take our money system back and create interest-free loans instead of giving money, doubling or tripling the cost of a house and giving it all to the Federal Reserve banking system. It's actually a pretty sound system. It'll work well. I've had economists look it over. My question is a simple one on my website. But if you could take your house and pay it off in 10 years at the standard rate you're paying right now, or if you could cut your price of your house down by half to 1/3 of what you're paying right now, depending on whether you're at 3 or 6% interest, you could create a situation where people could afford to buy their own houses, afford to buy them at a reasonable price, and be able to get the cost of housing to go down automatically. I don't think there's anything the government can do to force the cost of housing down. Why would a builder want to build a house for less money when he can build it for more money for somebody else? So that we got to find a natural way to cause it to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Richard Boyce. So far this year, it's estimated that over 23,000 Americans have died from gun violence. What legislation would you support or propose to address gun violence in the United States? Richard Boyce.
None. That's it. None.
Thank you. Keith Swank.
Police officers are doing their job. They're arresting bad people and putting them in jail. Prosecutors aren't doing their job and keeping them in jail, and judges are releasing people on limited bail. What we need to do is we need to put, this is the solution for crime. We put bad people in jail, and we understand that there are evil people out there in America and in this world that are unable to conduct themselves as basic human beings out in society. As a police officer for 32 years, I have arrested some of the most violent people in America, homicide suspects. I have seen people at a young age, 12 years old, kill somebody else. And then when you speak with them, they just say, I just felt like doing it. We can't fix that, but what we can do is keep people that are evil from being on the streets and killing more people and harming more people. So the gun violence is simple. In my opinion, for Americans, we need to make sure that you exercise your Second Amendment constitutional rights, because police response time right now is 11 minutes for a priority 1 call nationwide because of the Defunding Police Act. So that's going on. You are going to have to defend yourselves and make sure that you are safe to be able to defend yourself and your family and even possibly your neighbors. It's sad, but that's a situation we're in right now. And we Republicans will change that when you elect us and send us to Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Mahaffey.
Yeah. I was listening to a show this morning talking about gun violence in America, and apparently more than half of them are actually suicides. So a lot of people are actually killing themselves with guns, and that needs to stop. I don't think people really respect what life is until you're about somewhere between 25 and 30, until you start actually getting a handle on it. One of the biggest things I'd like to see is dividing the guns up into what they can do and what they can't do. If you want to have a single shot hunting rifle, whatever state you says to probably 25. If you want to have anything that does any kind of repeating, probably from the age 25 to probably the age 35. And if you still want to go out and buy some military type equipment, then from 35 on up. I mean, I think the older you are, the more you respect life, and the less likely you are to do something stupid with a gun. So really, I think raising the age, I don't think guns are going to go away in America. There's a lot of people who don't like them and don't understand them. Frankly, I'm okay with guns. But I think we shouldn't be giving them to people so young, because people at that 14 age and those younger ages don't appreciate what life is. And our movies, if we can get our movies to stop using 1 million bullets as entertainment, maybe people would stop thinking killing each other is a way to solve our problems. People do what they see. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you. Marilyn Strickland.
I was proud to vote in favor of the bipartisan Safer Communities Act. And this is common sense gun safety legislation, which does a few things. It has background checks. It provides red flag laws to alert people when someone may be a danger to themselves or others. It closes the boyfriend loophole because women are often the victims of domestic, intimate partner violence due to gun violence. As Eric mentioned earlier, a lot of suicides happen, and these horrific mass shootings that take place in schools and public places really represent a small fraction of the gun violence that happens in America. It happens every single day. I am vehemently opposed to anyone who is not in the military or not in law enforcement owning guns that are made to kill large numbers of people quickly. There's no good reason for that. As we think about the causes, the root causes of why people turn to gun violence, we have to ask ourselves, why are so many men turning to violence and using guns as a way to solve problems? And especially what's happening with our young men in America. We need more mental health and counseling services, which this act does provide, but really taking a holistic approach to this. There are more guns than people in the United States of America. We have a duty to each other to make sure that we are keeping each other safe and secure. And this act is a good step in the right direction, but I do believe that we can do more.
Thank you. Next question, and we'll start with Keith Swank. What legislation would you support or propose to address immigration issues? Keith Swank.
I believe that right now we need to stop all immigration that's coming into America so we get a handle on it, because we have a lot of immigrants coming across our southern border and it's not secure. And we don't know what's coming through there. Terrorists possibly are coming through there. Within the past few months, over 50 possible terrorists were stopped there. We also have people flying into our country from foreign countries that want to bring harm to America. So we need to screen people better from countries where they're coming into. There are enemies out there throughout the world who want to kill Americans and destroy America. We need to do a better job of screening for that. And how we start that is by building a physical wall on our southern border. That will also deter all the drugs that are coming across our border, killing our American citizens, and all the human trafficking, the sex trafficking, the human trafficking for labor coming across our southern border, right up the I-5 corridor, right through the 10th Congressional District and into Vancouver, Canada. So we need to put a physical wall there to stop that. And we need to have entry points so people can come through to our country legally, and we can screen and tell who's coming in here. This is our country, and we need to make sure that we keep our citizens safe, and we can do that by building a physical wall on our southern border. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Mahaffey, what legislation would you support or propose to address immigration?
Immigration, if we can create a clean path for people to come into this country, something that doesn't take years and cost zillions of dollars, then these people would be able to come in, get a green card or the correct paperwork to actually be part of this country. And then they wouldn't have to hide in the bushes and hide behind things and not be able to get full jobs and end up having to be forced into maybe having to do violence to get the things they're trying to look for. But basically, if we give them a clean path to come in and we give them a good, clean way to get here that doesn't take forever and doesn't cost a fortune, I think we could take care of a lot of that problem. Also, the southern border is such a small portion, and anybody who's run the numbers on building a wall will tell you it's a bad way to spend our taxpayer dollars. One of the downsides is when you make someone illegal, you make them invisible. And at that point, because they're invisible, people can do horrible, horrible things to them. So we need to create a better pathway. I think that's the strongest way to get it done. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Marilyn Strickland.
Great. The thing that we need more than anything else is comprehensive immigration reform. And I say this based on conversations I have with my colleagues who actually serve from the border states. Fewer than 18% of the people who are here in the US illegally actually come through our southern borders. But it doesn't mean we don't need comprehensive immigration reform. We need to be very thoughtful about how people get into this country, help dreamers who are young people who are already here find a path to citizenship, and really recognize that we do have a humanitarian crisis. And yes, no denying that there is drug trafficking that happens and sexual trafficking. but we need a comprehensive approach to this. Demonizing people or trying to use this as a wedge issue is not how we solve the problem. There was a time in America during the Bush administration when there was actually comprehensive immigration reform on the table. We have to get to that. And as far as terrorists coming across the southern border, I'm more worried about domestic terrorists in America, like those who stormed January 6th and are creating terror right here, homegrown, than I am about people coming from the southern border.
Thank you. Richard Boyce.
Yes, make E-Verify the law of the land so nobody can get a job without social security numbers being verified. Purge social security no match numbers. Understand we have over 6 million unmatched social security numbers for people who are over 112 years old. We need to clean that up so people can't use them. And then we need to take away all the benefits that illegal aliens have been having access to, like education and healthcare. And when somebody comes across a border, the southern border today, they get an EBT card and a cell phone. Now that's discouragement, isn't it? That's telling them they're not welcome here and they need to go back. That's ridiculous. Finish the wall and then start. Instead of comprehensive immigration reform, we need to enforce the laws that are on the books right now. How about the rule of law? Anybody ever heard of that? Let's try it. That's me.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Eric Mahaffey. What legislation would you propose to address substance abuse and mental health issues? Eric Mahaffey.
Substance abuse and mental health issues. I've always thought, see, I've never been a drug user. It just mystifies me why people want to do that and put drugs in their body and put shots in their arms. So frankly, I'm a little stumped. I would rather try to create a system where people don't want to use drugs. If there's nobody buying them, there's nobody selling them. So I do believe a lot in the mental health aspect. I do believe a lot in treating our brain as a part of our organ, as part of our body, as part of what needs to be taken care of. So yes, mental health is very important. I think it would solve a lot of issues, but mental health also starts young. As a kid, if you're not taken proper care of, if you're not given nurture, if you're a latchkey child that's running around being raised by other kids in the neighborhood, you're going to start out in the bad direction. So it starts young. It starts with good daycare. It starts with good food. It starts with proper care at a young age. It starts by getting people off in the right direction. And people do what they say. I mean, you have a lot of men playing video games with just blood pouring out of anybody. I at the break table, I listen to guys talk about how to kill someone in a video game, and they're talking about twisting their neck off. So video games are way too violent. Once again, if we can start figuring out ways to get all the violence out of all of our games and our movies, maybe we could start moving people in the right direction and show some compassion to each other.
Thank you. Marilyn Strickland.
So when we look at the conversation about substance abuse, it's really getting to the question about the root causes of it. And we know that substance abuse crosses all demographics, it crosses all zip codes, and there's no one demographic that is subject to it. There are a couple of things, though, that I've learned over the years. People who have adverse childhood experiences are often more likely to end up abusing substances as they get older. And also, too, when there is one substance that is taken away, they will often turn to something else. So for me, it's about getting to the root causes of why people choose to abuse substances. It's making sure that we provide ample opportunities for people to get access to mental health care and recovery systems. And also, too, again, having strong, supportive communities. People have access to a good job, where there's stability, and also making sure that when they come out of recovery, that we are staying with them and making sure that they don't fall back into substance abuse.
Thank you. Richard Boyce.
Yes, I'm a bit libertarian about this. I don't think drugs should be illegal. I think that people should have access to them and be responsible for themselves. I love self-responsibility. And as far as mental health in the early life, when you have children going to school and from kindergarten on, they're learning that the car that their mother and father drive to work is destroying the planet and going to kill them. And they're not going to make it to adulthood, and they're being sexualized and all the other crap that they learned in elementary school. That's why you have a great change, a great change in mental health in young children. So I don't know what the answers are, but we could start with ending the sexualization of our children and getting the SUVs out of first grade. So yeah, I'm not big on that.
Thank you. Keith Swank.
During my 10 years as a police officer, we did surveys with homeless people in Seattle. We found that over 90% of those people had a drug or alcohol addiction and or a mental health addiction that could have been brought on possibly by the drugs they were taking. In the 1990s, when I first became a police officer, we didn't have the homelessness problem that we have now. And one of the reasons why we didn't have it was because we practice compassion. And it's not compassionate to leave people who are hooked on drugs, that the most important thing for them in their life is to get their next fix out on the streets. So what we did was, and what we should do, is encourage local jurisdictions to enforce the law, specifically property crimes, because people have to steal things to feed their drug habit. And then they would go to court and they would see a judge. We called it drug court. And the judge gave them the opportunity to go into treatment or go to jail. And most of the time people pick treatment. If you think that you can just ask people who are hooked on methamphetamine if they'll go to treatment, they'll tell you, yes, I'll do it tomorrow. And tomorrow never comes, because the most important thing is about their next high. And until people understand that, like I do, you won't have a solution for it. The solution is this: we enforce the law and we make them go get treatment, because they will never do it on their own. And it's been proven time and time again. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we come to our last question of the evening, and we'll start with Marilyn Strickland. In this era of partisan deadlock, how would you work across the aisle in Congress for the benefit of the people of Washington? Marilyn Strickland.
Right. Well, thank you very much for that question. So I'm proud to say that I am a lifelong Democrat, but I already do work across the aisle. I serve on 2 committees that require bipartisan support. I serve on the House Armed Services Committee because we have Joint Base Lewis McChord right in the middle of our district. And I also serve on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. As you know, the bill that was passed that President Biden signed into law was in fact a bipartisan law. The Safer Communities Act, which dealt with gun violence, was a bipartisan law. The recent defense bill that we're going to bring to the floor was passed out of committee 57-1 in a bipartisan manner. As someone who works hard for our military community, for our veterans, and supporting small businesses, I have co-led letters with members of Republican Party, and I do my best to work with folks. When I talk to people about politics today, they're exhausted. It's been a pandemic. It's been a rough year. And they say to me, can you guys please find a way to work together? Do you want good jobs for everyone? Do you want people to be securely housed? Do we want to address homelessness? Do we want everyone to have access to a decent retirement? We want people to have access to healthcare. Do we want people to be safe when they go to school and go shopping, not be afraid of gun violence? If we can agree yes on that, then we need to find a way to work together to solve these big problems that this country faces. Democracy is in danger right now, and we have to work together to make this work.
Thank you. Richard Boyce, how would
Yeah.
you work across the aisle for the benefit of the people of Washington?
I'm afraid I wouldn't. That's why I'm part of the Congress Sucks party. I really do believe that. And the reason being is it's a uniparty. There's no Democrat and Republican. It's a uniparty. I think back on all the opportunities the Republicans had to prevent huge omnibus spending bills from going through, and that sell out at the last minute. They had an opportunity, and that would have reduced inflation. And Democrats and Republicans are just 2 sides of the same coin. And I don't see any prospects other than my mission in Washington, D.C. would be to reduce the size of government. We don't create jobs in Washington, D.C. We don't create housing in Washington, D.C. We don't build roads and bridges in Washington, D.C. We just steal money from the states and then give them some of it back. And most of it is borrowed and in debt. So there's your inflation and there's your bipartisanship.
Thank you. Keith Swank, how would you work across the aisle?
It's very interesting now that Democrats are facing the biggest losses ever in a midterm election that we hear Democrats say we want to work across the aisle when that never happens. This is what happens with Democrats who are in charge. They impose their will. There is no working across the aisle with Democrats. Democrats, when they say we want to compromise, that says you come our way, we won't go your way at all. If they truly want to compromise, we could compromise on things. For instance, I want to have a physical wall on our southern border. And if they want one on the northern border, that's fine too. But Democrats say we want to have a virtual wall. So I can compromise. Let's have a physical wall and a virtual wall. That's compromise. There's no compromise going on with it. Congresswoman Strickland has voted 100% of the time with Nancy Pelosi on all important
Excuse
things.
me, there's no personal.
Oh, that's not a personal attack. That's you can look it up and public.
Do not mention other candidates' names. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, that would just, when you were talking about working across the aisle, that's what you need to do is work across the aisle, not vote lockstep with your party. So me, I wouldn't vote in lockstep with the Republicans because Republicans spend a lot of money and do a lot of things that they shouldn't be doing in Washington, D.C. also. So I'd be standing up for the people of the 10th Congressional District and the people of the United States to make sure that we're representing their best interests back in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Mahaffey.
That was an easy one. I work across the aisle every night. My wife is a hard right Republican. I'm a hard left, basically. So that's simple. I've got people on my phone that I have almost knock down, drag out Republican Democrat conversations, and afterwards we give each other a hug. We go to the same parties. I already work across the aisle. I have a handful of police officers on my phone. I can give a call right now. They don't always agree with me politically, but they do agree that we talk and we have good conversations. Working across the aisle is simple. It might just be part of the way my head works, but I don't hold a grudge. If you can be hard against me, I'll go up to you the next day and say, all right, how can we deal with that? Or do you want to have lunch? And I try to get to know the people I'm dealing with. There's no way you can work across the aisle unless you understand what's in the head of the other person. So I'm always reaching out. I want to understand why they think the way they're thinking. I want to figure out why they're working, why their head goes there. I feel like right now there's a lot of bad information coming across the television set. They'll tell you that I'm getting a lot of bad information from me across the television set. I try to have conversations about which one it is to figure it out. There's got to be some truth to where they're standing. I don't always agree or understand it, but I never stop making the effort to figure it out. So working across the aisle for me is a freaking breeze. I'm not scared of it at all, and I'll be able to do it nonstop. I've been doing it for 35 years. I'll just keep going.
Thank you. Now it's time for closing statements. Each candidate has up to 1 minute for their closing statement. We're going to change the order of the opening statements. So we're going to start with Keith Swank, then Eric Mahaffey, then Marilyn Strickland, and then Richard Boyce. Keith Swank, your 1 minute closing statement.
Crime is out of control. It's the highest it's ever been. Inflation is the highest it's ever been. And the reason for this is because Democrat policies have brought us to this. Democrats stand for defunding the police. Democrats stand for no or low bail to allow violent offenders back out on our streets, and they're making our community safe. People in the 10th Congressional District are worried when they walk out of their house if their car is going to be there or if their catalytic converter is going to be there. Crime, armed robberies up 200% in our district. Assaults are up over 52%, and theft is up over 100%. And that's has happened within the past year, and it is because of Democrat policies. So we need to elect people like me, Keith Swank, who has experience in law enforcement and understands what we need to keep our community safe. and will fight to lower inflation every day that I'm back in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for this opportunity. God bless you and God bless America.
Thank you. Eric Mahaffey.
Yeah, I've been doing everything in my power to keep money out of my politics. I have been not accepting money from anyone. I have been taking the time to keep all of my funding out of my pocket. I've got less than $2,500 in my entire campaign, which includes a nice big box of business cards. So I'm doing what it takes to not get hooked up or tangled up with any of the political garbage that's going on. I don't care if you're a Democrat, a Republican, a liberal, a conservative, hard right, hard left. My job is to figure out how to represent you. I want to do everything in my power to keep my doors open. I want people to have, I want to be able to put out a regular questionnaire to the people in the 10th district so they can actually see what I'm being asked to vote on, get opinions on what they think is good, on what they think is bad. I want to try to figure out how to keep you, people from the 10th district, involved in your own government. That's what democracy is supposed to be. I am a great believer in democracy. I'm trying to find ways to get this country to be more answerable to its people. But it's also really important that we get clean, honest information also.
Thank you. Marilyn Strickland.
Well, thank you again to the League of Women Voters and to my fellow candidates for being here tonight. It is my honor to represent the 10th Congressional District and the 770,000 people who now call the 10th CD home. Every time I go to Congress in DC, I'm working for a nation that is more safe, more just, and more secure. There's been a lot going on right now, and we are working very hard to try to do what we can. I'm a proud Democrat. I will never compromise my values, but I am always willing to work with people who want to work with me to do what's going to best serve the people in the 10th district. Whether or not you vote for me, I am working for you every single day. My district team has recovered over $5 million from the VA, from Social Security, to get benefits back into your hands, including the IRS. It's my honor to represent you, and I humbly ask you to send me to Congress again so that I can be the voice of the South Puget Sound in Congress. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Boyce, your 1-minute closing statement.
Yes, things have gotten considerably different than the past 245 years of our nation. And there are some things that I need to know. I would like to know about CBDC, central bank digital currency. That's important to me. The Great Reset, that's important to me. Why are all of our senior government officials and members of Congress attending the World Economic Forum? That's of interest to me. And I would be learning about these things in DC, and I would be doing a YouTube video at least once a week to keep you up on what's going on instead of a postcard twice a year. I have different priorities apparently than most people. Yeah, I like jobs. I like housing. I like all that other stuff, but I'm also in love with the country. I want it to hang around.
Thank you. Thank you all. In ballot order, the candidates for the 10th Congressional District are Marilyn Strickland, Richard Boyce, Keith Swank, Eric Mahaffey, and Dan Ernest Borden. You all should receive your ballot by July 18th. Be sure to vote early and no later than August 2nd. I would like to thank the candidates who participated, the timekeeper, Shelley Knight, Tacoma-Pierce County League of Women Voters and Thurston County League of Women Voters, and our community sponsors, the Affordable Housing Consortium, Asia Pacific Cultural Center, Grit City Co-op, Latinx Unidos of South Sound, the NAACP of Tacoma, the Sumner Waller Community Association, the Tacoma Urban League, Vibrant Schools, and the YWCA of Pierce County. You can see other League of Women Voter candidate forums at our website, LWVTPC, that's LWVTPC.org. Read your voters pamphlet and look at vote411.org, that's vote411.org, where you can find answers to questions posed to all candidates running for office. Read the candidates' websites and do all that you can to be an educated voter. And don't forget to vote by August 2nd. Thank you all and have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Thank you.